Hi everybody, welcome to our very first group critique. I'll be holding a group critique every week throughout the 5.5 weeks, so we'll have a total of, I believe, 6 critiques, maybe 7, depending upon the assignments in week 5. 6 for sure. And I typically do the critiques the day after the assignment is due for the character. So it's really a good idea to aim to get your work in by the deadline, especially for the caricature project, so that you can be involved in the group critique. If you're not able to submit by the deadline, I'll post feedback if I'm in the classroom after the group critique. Typically, I usually am one more day, and I'll post you some text feedback, which is going to be helpful. But as as you probably can understand, it's really good to be part of this group critique. So the first assignment that we've already been completed, most students have completed that already, was the Photoshop exercise, the classroom in a book exercise that we did. And that assignment through the submission Dropbox, and I provide text feedback in the comments. And if you look at the announcements board right now, you'll see I have some tips on how to view that feedback, and then you're going to take that feedback and you're going to revise and submit into the final submission area by the end of the week. So the same thing with this feedback, but instead of the comments area, it's through this group critique. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to say about the group critique. Okay, yeah, let's move on to talking about the character project. So the character project is, over the whole entire class. Every week we're going to be doing a new version of it. And so this is where we're doing the sketches part, where you're generating ideas. So let's say you chose Garbage Dump Dan, for example. You'll have 4 different sketches showing different ways that you came up with of creating Garbage Dump Dan using objects. And then so next week what you're going to be doing is choosing photographs for your character for all the different parts. So whatever parts you have listed in your chosen sketch, you're going to choose photographs to go along with that. And that's for next week. Let's see. So the most important thing here is that you've got 4 different ideas for your character. Let's say, again, Garbage Dump Dan, 4 different sketches. And you're going to choose one of those sketches for next week. Now, I would just want to say that throughout this class, this is a very organic class in terms of making changes. So let's say you choose one of your sketches and you decide, hey, I want to make some changes to that sketch, or maybe I want to combine some sketches. Like I like the legs of sketch 2 and I like the head of sketch 1, or the whatever I'm developing. That's really okay to do. So just keep thinking it's all about creating a really great character by the very end. And so you're going to, make changes throughout. So again, the sketches may change and from the original idea, and that's just fine. And so the purpose of this sketch is to just really be creative with the sketch and have a lot of different ideas, because typically as designers, if someone says, hey, just give me one idea, we do that, but typically we like to do more than that, because oftentimes the first sketch is maybe a little bit rigid, or it's not very creative. So the more the ideas you generate, typically the more creative you get through that process. And that's typically why we as designers like to have more than one thumbnail or one comp of a design. It's just because it gets those juices going when you don't, when you have a bunch of different ideas to develop, you go, oh, what the heck, I'll just try this and see what happens. So you tend to be a little bit more flexible with your ideas. Okay, so I think that's it. So we're going to look at the sketches now, taking a look at them. And the main thing that I'm looking for is just that every object every part of your character is built out of an object. That's really the most important thing at this phase, because that is what you're going to be using with photographs. So next week you need to have photographs of objects, like something that a camera took, and so the sketches need to reflect that. As I mentioned in my notes here, drawing doesn't really matter so much. about your drawing skills. Just is it clearly communicated? That's really, everybody has a different drawing style. It doesn't have to be realistic to be a good communicator. So don't worry so much. I know in other classes we actually do study drawing, and so the parameters are different. But in this one, whatever you came up with, as long as it's clear and communicates, that's all that matters. Okay, Alexandria. Let's see. Yeah, let's see, the multiple page PDF and pictures. Yeah, if you didn't have a scanner, that's fine. Camera is just fine. These days, even our cell phone cameras are pretty good. So, yeah, like what you did here, just kind of putting up the drawing and just keeping it nice and sort of flat. You can also tape it up to a wall. That's the key thing, so that it's clear and in focus. Um, and Okay, so this is a multi-page PDF. That's great. Um, so this is Garden Glitter Grace. Yeah, this looks good. So you've got everything labeled, which is great. Labeling things is a really great idea because, I mean, why not? It's easier to recognize items, and yeah, that's nice too. Yeah, these all look really good. All of these have really good ideas. I like how what you did here is even when you added a face, you made them out of objects. I think that's really important that everything in your character is made out of objects. And so, yeah, all of these look really good. So I would just choose the one that you like. Um, and as I mentioned in my introductory notes, feel free to kind of organically change things. I have found, really for all of the characters, but especially for Garden Glitter Grace or Garden Glitter Glen, like the ones that are kind of more kind of plant oriented, or a lot of times people will choose plant items. That's not the only items you could choose. There's other things in the garden as well. Um, I have found that the you sometimes have to really kind of like, you may have like really decided, for example, like for this element, like the hair on top, that this is a great element when you draw it. And then when you go and you start building it or looking for photographs, either of those stages, you think, that doesn't really work. And I just think that the nature of more plant materials is that you got to be quite flexible with them. And so if that doesn't work, then maybe you do something else, or maybe you kind of blend different sketches together, like a different head, or maybe it's just the walnut that you use. um, so yeah, keep that in mind, and that's true for everybody. Just it's really good to be flexible in this project because we're doing sketches where in a sketch really any character design is possible, you know but when you get to actually building it, finding the photographs and building it, that's where you realize, oh yeah, maybe it won't work in reality. Okay, all right. Well, you're done with this assignment. You don't have to make any revisions. Okay, Troy, so Garbage Dump Dan, that's always a really interesting character to work with. Um, yeah, this is a great sketch. Very nice. I love all of the different elements here and the way that, it's based on the idea of sort of a hamburger that's walking, which is an interesting idea. With these characters, you can really, and this is sort of a general comment for everybody, it can be sort of humanoid looking, with arms and legs, like kind of like based on that model. It can be like some sort of creature that hops. Maybe it has multiple legs. Maybe it has wings. Um, it's really, you can sort of, as long as it has kind of a sense of being kind of something that could live and breathe and move, there's really, all kinds of options for creating a character. Um, yeah, and I love the idea of what you said about how the character features can come from the element itself. You know what I mean? And that's true. Like, for those of you who are working with like a flower head, that can often naturally start looking like a head. But a lot of objects you can just by where you put them, like you put them as a head, somewhere where the head would be, things can start looking like heads really easily without you having to add any features, because we'll see it that way. So features, adding extra features are good too, but you can also, of course, just let them, exist. Uh, oh, I love the idea of a teacup turned over. That's a very interesting idea. Yeah, these are all really good. So I think to me, this looks very complete. A lot of thought involved, a lot of creativity. So I think you're complete with this assignment. Feel free to choose whichever one you want to work with or whichever combination you like. The one thing I will say, just as a pointer, kind of a tip for uh, the assignment, is that I have found, as much as it is really wonderful to have, like when you have arms and legs, to have different ones because you have different objects, and that's always fun. When it comes to actually making the character look like a character, like because we're taking all of these different objects and we want them to, sort of fall into place as a character, I have found that having symmetry with the arms and legs can make that happen. Like, for example, like two egg beaters or two staplers, for legs. That will, you'll start the character will start reading a little bit more strongly. That's not always the case, but just as a tip, that can be a good one. Again, nothing to change in your sketches here. They look great, but it's just something to keep in mind, further down the road. Hey, Amanda, yeah, this sketch looks great. Yeah, as I mentioned in my initial comments, with sketching, not all of us are realistic drawers, and but a lot of us will end up having to draw for our various kind of design pursuits. Like, let's say you need to sketch something out to show a client. We don't always have the ability to sit down at our computer and kind of really like labor over like a digital drawing, which actually takes a lot more time, which is why sketching is so great because it's fast and you can do it right on the spot. But you don't need to be necessarily a perfectly realistic drawer to do kind of good little sort of thumbnail sketches for clients. And would be perfectly acceptable, and you kind of develop your own style and you get more confident in what you're doing. And you use labels, you explain it. So yeah, keep that in mind. Yeah, this looks good. And let's just keep going here. Yeah. Oh yeah, these are all rain boots. Yeah, very nice. So I would say I love the idea of the skirt here. That could be interesting. And then the head. I would say just off the bat that my favorite is maybe this first one, but number 1 and 2, are really reading as character designs. But they all of them will change over time as you develop them. So like the same comments that I suggested to the previous person with Garden Glitter Grace is that a lot of times with like floral details and like little elements like this, sometimes they can be hard to work with. So feel free to just really be organic in the process. Like maybe these grouping of flowers, maybe that would work, or maybe you would just have a couple flowers here, or one big flower, or maybe something else. Same with the hair. Sometimes it can work to get some vines as hair, but maybe something else could work as, the reason why they're difficult is because they're very thin and fragile. I guess I should really explain why they can be difficult. Because when you select things in Photoshop, like we did in that exercise that we just did, the kind of more finer and more delicate things the harder they are to select in Photoshop. It's just the kind of the way it is. Which isn't to say this idea couldn't work, but just be flexible if you run into some issues with it. And feel free to always kind of replace things. Like maybe you could find a grass skirt, for example, like one that's already made. There's probably some on the internet that you could use, and that might be more, easier to work with than sort of single strands of grass. Okay, so you're done with this assignment as well. Nilda, yeah, Flippin' Food Fran is a really great character. I think that's a really terrific choice. And, the idea of using food items to create her is just really fun. There's always a lot of, really excellent shapes in foods, like round shapes, a lot of sort of big, sort of kind of interesting, like think of different types of melons or tomatoes or potatoes, all the different kinds of shapes that are really interesting and can create a body. So yeah, all these look really good. Yeah, very nice. You've sort of built the whole thing out of objects, which is important. I like the sort of the big body. Oftentimes I think having sort of a big bulky torso, something that's kind of takes up a lot of room is a good idea. These all look really good. Uh, and oh, a taco body. That's an interesting idea. Yeah, these look good, good too. Tortilla body. So something to keep in mind. So I've noticed. Now, I think these all look really good, and I don't think you need to make any revisions to these drawings. This feels, complete to me. But just a note about this, about the tortilla body as well as probably the toast body as well, is that these are both items as cute as they are. I have found that the flatter something is, especially in the torso, the body part, like a toast is very thin and flat, so is a tortilla, that it tends to not work as well as something that is sort of more three-dimensional. Like, for example, let's see, what do you have here? A pancake, well, it's kind of flat too. Let me see what we have. Like the tomato, like a tomato, a big round tomato, like instead of the toast would make a better body for this project, just based on my experience of teaching this class and seeing people put together their characters. So don't need to make any changes now, but just keep that in mind. I would avoid something that's really flat for the body, even maybe for the face, but especially for the body. So like anything that you have that's more sort of three-dimensional, like really kind of thick or solid, has a lot of volume, that would be the way to go. Okay, good job. Lean garbage dump Dan, that's always a great choice. Yeah, this looks good. A trash bag. Trash bags are pretty interesting items. I had a student, I don't know if I still have an example of what he did with the trash bag. If you drop me a note, maybe I can look for it. I think I may have it somewhere. But he built I think his entire character out of trash bags. Um, Anyhow, yeah, it's a good item, and yeah, I like the box. That's a nice item. The arms, yeah, that's look really good. Down here, these could maybe operate as feet. I think that's what you're thinking, like the ends of the box, so you could maybe sort of hop around on them. Um, oh yeah, another garbage bag. Oh yeah, rubber glove arms. That could be cute. Yeah. Ooh, this is a nice one. Yeah, I like this one. I like the kind of the big body with the trash can, and also the pumpkin head. Because, with the jack-o'-lantern, there's lots of images online already that have, beautiful images of jack-o'-lanterns that people have created that you could use. I actually had a student do that in a previous class for the head, and it was like a ready-made face. It was pretty cute. Yeah, these are all, yeah, really good. And, we're going to be some, I think it's maybe in week 3, we're going to learn about a technique in Photoshop called puppet warp. It's called puppet warp, and we're going to be doing a classroom in a book exercise with it. And then once you learn that technique, you can actually, and this is true for everybody, you can do these really interesting kind of, like you can take a shape like a trash can, right? Like you've drawn it kind of with these curves in it, which typically we don't see with trash cans. But with Puppet Warp, you can do something like that. You can kind of get these wonderful sort of like curves and changes to the object, and it can be really interesting because it can add some animation to your character, like a sense like your character is got sort of like this, like maybe he's breathing in, or he's got this different sort of slightly different kind of more curving body shape that will look more realistic as a character or a creature. I like this. So I like this one, and so I would say that my favorites are this one, and again, things can change, or this one. I think they already are really starting to look the most like a character um, right off the bat. But I think they're all good, and I don't think you need to make any changes here in your project. I think you're complete with this particular assignment. Okay, Nelson. Yeah, Flippin' Food Fred. Yeah, I think that getting inspired by objects around you is a really terrific idea. Because, sometimes when you're thinking, you're like, oh, what objects are there available? And you know what I mean? Like I think it can be difficult. Whereas a lot of these particular objects we're looking at are like Garbage Dump Dan, we can relate to anybody who's like around a garden, or likes plants. Flippin' Food, Fred or Fran, they all are things that you can sort of go somewhere and kind of look at all the different objects and get inspired. So that's great. Let's see here. So Oh, bread. Okay, yes, and a pot for, it looks like a kind of an upside down pot for the head. Pancake mix. Yeah, so that's a, yeah, that looks good. So all, yeah, it looks like, ooh, this is an interesting one. So this is a, oh, a loaf of bread. I love that. Yeah, that's a really cool item. It's like very sort of bulky and big, and it's got those kind of interesting sort of lines in it. You know, if it's, it looks like this maybe is sliced, although it doesn't have to be, right? It could be just something that's like a solid one. It looks like maybe it's gonna roll. Is that right? A plate, so it's kind of gonna roll around on the ground. That's going to be the wheel of it. Maybe it could, you could make a couple wheels, you know. Uh, okay, the face, that looks good, and then sort of a banana face. Yeah, those are all really cute ideas. Yeah, that one's really interesting too. Eggs for the eyes, protein powder, fork, knife. Yeah, those are all, yeah, these are all great. So, and I love the head here. This looks like a bit similar to the previous one. Here. Oh, a little bit different. Yeah, like upside down. So I would just say the only thing I would suggest here is it's a little, I had to sort of struggle a little bit to see all of your drawings. And so, you know, this can really just happen sometimes when you're, you know, either photographing or scanning your drawings. Sometimes they can fade a little bit. Um, so I would probably just either look at your drawings if they're a little light, just darken up the edges a little bit. You can just go with a nice soft pencil or, you know, just go over slowly, go over these lines just to kind of clarify them. And then with your, also same thing with your writing, it's a little hard to see. Writing, I have really not very good handwriting, and I end up always block print, you know, like using uppercase, like just like block printing when I want to label something because I don't think people could read my handwriting. And even though I like my handwriting, but it's a little hard. So I would do that. I would relabel these just really clear. You know, you can see some people have actually labeled them in Photoshop or, you know, like with digital text. That's fine with me too if you know how to do that or you want to do that. But either way, this is the best drawing. This one's really easy to see, very clear. So whatever you did with this one in terms of the drawing, I would do the same with the other ones. You know, in design, you know, we can have wonderful ideas and have a lot of imagination and creativity and put a lot of thought into our designs. But if the communication part, the presentation or communication is not quite right, you know, then we can really lose the success, you know, of our designs. You know, it's like a resume. You probably heard the same thing with creating a resume, that you can have all this great experience, but if you have kind of a resume that's kind of messy or has a lot of kind of typos or formatting issues with it, people won't spend the time looking at it. You know, it's the same principle. So again, you don't need to know how to draw, like I've mentioned before. Just kind of spend some time on anything, you know, just about thinking about communication. And that will really, in any class you take, I think that's really good, a good rule of thumb. Hi, Angel. Okay, garbage dump Dawn. Yeah, she's such a cute character to work with. And, you know, if you look at the character, everybody, the character directions or instructions, you'll notice that each character has, like, you can either do a male or a female version of the character. So there's Garbage Dump Dan or Garbage Dump Dawn. So, you know, you can kind of like play with that and see which one you want to work with. Um, yeah, so in your character um, designs, the sketches, the thing that I would work on just a little bit more is the drawing itself. Um, and you know, as I mentioned before, you don't need to be a good drawer to draw. I would just say that, so what you're doing here is you're doing really fast sketches. Um, and you know, we sometimes do fast sketches when we're drawing, but the slower you draw, the better it's going to be. So slow, like this one's getting pretty close. I'm not able to read the labels you have on here. So I would just work on your presentation a little bit more. This one too is a little hard to understand what's happening here. So I would slow down a little bit and you know, not do so much sketching and scribbling over things, but just like kind of clear lines, just like what we've looked at in the previous ones. And then when it comes to photographing your drawings, um, what you can do is rather than laying it down flat, because you almost always get an angle that way, you know, when you lay something flat, because then it's hard to get there. Take your drawing and just tape it up on a like on a wall. You know, just get any type of tape, doesn't matter, just or pin it or whatever on a wall, and then take your camera, and that way you can stand right in front of it and you can take a nice photograph of it, very clear. Okay, so that's what I'd work on here because I can tell you've got some good ideas, but I'm really, I'd like to be able to see them a little bit more clearly. Okay, so just slow down with the sketches, label everything really clearly, slow, just block letters, and then rephotograph it. Okay, Claire, I think that's what you prefer, isn't that right? Um, okay, so for your sketches, um, I'm not 100% sure what character you chose. Oh, garden glitter grace, trans garden glitter grace. Oh, that sounds like a great idea. So, so what you want to do here is draw your objects a little bit more clearly about what each of these parts are going to be. Like, what would the head be made out of? What would, you know, the arms be made out of, and the legs? So each part. So you cannot use, unfortunately, you can't use anything that is human for this. It has to be objects. So what you want to do is sort of creatively think about how you can build each character based on those parameters. So hopefully, you know, the critique that we've already worked on will give you some ideas, you know, the previous project. But I would just kind of redo these, kind of really sit down and brainstorm a little bit with different objects. And then, you know, just I think you've got a good drawing style here. So I think you're, you know, you just want to rebuild and take a look also at the assignment directions a little bit more carefully. But I think hopefully what we've covered today will be really useful to you. And if you have any questions, let me know. And then when you're photographing, see if you can just do what I mentioned to the previous student in terms of photographing just straight on. Like you can, I mean, if you want to keep these in your book, you know, as sketches, then maybe you can get sort of up higher so that you can photograph it more straight on, you know, right above it. Sometimes I'll actually put it on the floor and stand above it. That can be really good, just so that we can get a clear idea of your pictures. And then if you can, put these together in a PDF. And I think I have a direction. Do I have directions somewhere on how to do that in Photoshop if you don't have Acrobat? I don't think I do, but so if you don't have Acrobat, what you can do is go into Photoshop and you can go to Automate PDF Presentation, and you can, I've opened all of your files here and I just added the open files, and then all you need to do is save. You know, there might be a few more dialog boxes, but it'll create a PDF for you from your sketches, so you don't need to, again, you don't need to have Acrobat in order to be able to complete that step. Okay, let me know if you have any questions. Okay, Margaret. Yeah, this is a really interesting idea. So Rockin' Rhapsody Rita, so you're kind of thinking of making her like almost like a mascot for margaritas, you know, which is, I think that's a great idea. I have never had anybody do that before. Most people kind of think of musical instruments and music for it, but I think this is a great idea, and I also really love margaritas. So that's a really, you know, fun idea. So, uh, okay. Okay, yeah, these are all great ideas. What you want to do is you want to have the face made out of objects. Okay, so either you want to kind of think about what your face will be made out of. Alternately, you really don't need a face. You know, because the head will start to read as a face. Maybe you could add one later. But if you can't think of, you know, ideas for that, just erase it, take it out. At this point, I think that would be just fine. Uh, and same thing with this one. So on all of your sketches, I'm having a little trouble seeing them. So what I'd like you to do is maybe darken the edges a little bit more, make your labels a little bit clear. I think your labels are not too bad, maybe a little clearer though, and just so you can really see them a little bit better. One thing that I'm a little worried about is that are you using the same items for each one? kind of the same basic ideas. If you can, it would be great if you really tried to have as much variation on your objects as possible. Now, of course, if your idea is the idea of a margarita, then um, some are going to be repeated. But if you can think of like kind of different objects that would work, that would be great. I love the idea of a margarita glass. Maybe you'd have different type of glasses for that too, like glass shapes if you want to work with that. Um, there's different types of margaritas too. So maybe you could include some of the things like I go to a Mexican restaurant that they have margaritas and then they'll have like tortilla chips. And so maybe there could be other things like little baskets that the tortilla chips come in. And um, so, you can really be kind of creative with that. Okay, so that's the main thing here is just work on the presentation a little bit more, replace or remove the faces with objects or not, and then make sure that each one is as unique a design as possible. Maybe within the objects that you have, you can really think about different kinds of ways of really creating the character. Like maybe one character will have like 6 feet. Maybe one somehow will have wings, like out of the same object. Do you know what I mean? So you can sort of play around with different types of variations on how you will create your character. Bernadette, Rock and Rhapsody Roy, that's a great character. And yes, next week when we start gathering photographs, yes, you can photograph the items yourself. You can also use stock images, like images you find on the web. And everybody, please do check out the information I posted for next week. Make sure you always read through all the pages in the learning path so you can, even if you don't spend a lot of time on each of them, so that you are aware of them. I have a page placed in there on where you can get your photographs. I've got some instructions on there, so please take note of that. It may be a little bit different than what's posted in the assignment instructions. As an instructor, just to condense what I've said there, I have like a completely open image policy in terms of where you get your photographs. As long as they're of objects and they're good quality, you can get them from Google Images, you can get them from a stock photo site, from the library, as long as they fit into the rest of our parameters in terms of quality of photograph, then you can get them anywhere. I know in other classes we do have restrictions on that in terms of like wanting it to be you guys to be aware of copyright and fair usage of photographs. But in this class, I just feel like we're in a beginning class, and I think it's important that you just get good photographs no matter where they come from. So keep that in mind. And sometimes actually, so while, um, having your own photographs, like taking your own photographs, can work out really well. I've had some really terrific assignments from students. It is another kind of challenge, to photograph professionally, as close to professionally as possible, because that's what we're trying to aim for. Is like that when you have good quality photographs, then your character works a lot better. So, don't feel like you have to do that. That's something that you can definitely just go get images off the web, and that really is just as good, and sometimes better. Okay, so Rock and Rhapsody Roy. Oh, that's a cute one. So just like I've asked other folks, like what are all of these going to be made out of, all of these elements? Uh, Ears, like what's the face? You've got a face in there. What are you going to do with that? Drum body, that's cute. So yeah, so I would say, so that's the main thing here, and I'm having a little trouble seeing your characters because there's a lot of kind of something happened in, I don't know what happened in your um, when you created these images. It looks like some lines got kind of crept in there. Again, feel free to scan or photograph if you just have a camera. Try to get them really clear. Make sure to really label your elements as clear as possible. If you don't have like really clear handwriting, just block letter them. I think that's the most important thing. So again, I'd have more to say here if I could see these a little bit more clearly. That's, I think, the main thing. Okay, and then make sure every element is made out of an object. And if you don't have, you don't necessarily need to build a face. It can just be a head at this point, and you can think about that later if you don't have ideas for what the face would be made out of. So those are the things I'd like you to work on. The toy creature, I think that's Terrible Toys Todd or Tanya, right? So, feel free to just label your drawing or come back, or when you have your final submission, just let us know or let me know at that point, because it'll be in the final submission area, which of those you chose. It doesn't matter, Todd or Tanya, they don't necessarily have to look like, you can make them completely whatever kind of gender combination you like. It doesn't really matter. But because our client, has asked us to choose, like we have to choose one of their characters, it is important that we actually state what is the character we've chosen with the full name, and we use that to build our concept, you know. And some of the concepts like Garden Glitter Grace, how will you can start thinking about what makes her glitter. Maybe it's not like something that's obvious. Maybe it's, just that she's a happy character. Like with Terrible Toys, Tanya, for example, what makes her terrible? It's something you can really, even if you don't necessarily have an idea right now, it is something you should be thinking about. Like, why is she terrible? Does she have something that makes her terrible, like a superpower? Or, does she carry something in her, does she have a weapon? Or what kind of terrible things does she do? That, just thinking about like how to develop the character, um, something to keep thinking about. Okay, so a Barbie head, that's a great idea. That naturally already has like a face on it. um, Fidget spinner, oh, that's a great idea. The crazy fidget spinners that are around. I saw a great Saturday night uh, an SNL sketch on fidget spinners just recently, as an aside. Okay, yeah, I think you're on the right track here. Yeah, I would draw these darker, label these a little bit more clearly. You notice I'm really kind of struggling to find, to look at everything. And you just, you don't want to make your client struggle when they see your sketch. Like, they shouldn't have to be going, oh, I can sort of make out that little thing. That is really something that as designers, it's up to us to really um, make it easy for them. Oh, I love this one. Octopus arms and stacking rings. This is a really cute one. I think I love the idea of multiple arms. It makes it very unusual, so I'm definitely a fan of that one. This one's not quite a character-like, in the sense that it's a little harder to see it as a character. It's sort of it's still at this point like a little bit too much like a bunch of objects, whereas this one is really starting to read as a character. This one maybe like, I like this one, but My Little Pony, like there's so much of this that's already just My Little Pony. Like if this was built out of like the tail from My Little Pony. Do you know what I mean? Like it's good for you to be doing the building as much as possible, like having like legs from something else and a body from something else. You know what I mean? So uh yeah, so okay, so what I'd probably recommend, so I'm kind of liking this one here and this one. And this one also, the drawing is so much better on this one too. I mean, that's one of the selling points why I really liked it, but it's also a really, really cool design. So that's what I'd recommend, is like improve your drawing a little bit, your labeling, maybe touch up a few of the sketches, like My Little Pony. You could maybe revise that one, maybe, think of something else you could do with that one. I think this is probably a good idea. Like I think this is really, I think, a good sketch in terms of the project. But again, it maybe is not my favorite in terms of what you have. Okay, I hope that helped. Hey, Austin, so I'm going to just open this up in, for some reason, I'm not quite sure why your sketches got a little bit small, but now that I've opened them in Photoshop, they're actually able to see them pretty good, which is great. So let's see here. Hold on, let's see what your character is. You're more animals than humanoids. That's great. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, humanoid, animal-like. Those are great ways, I mean, to develop the project. Flippin' food, garbage dump down. Yeah, you definitely want to pick one of them. So, whichever one you think at this point appeals to you. Let's look at your sketches, and I'll sort of um, let's just kind of go through them. beak funnel, head tomato. I love that idea. Body. Yeah, that's definitely a cool one. And head pear. So to me, it looks more like you're actually going with maybe Flippin' Food, Fred or Fran. I'm kind of feeling like that. So I would actually just go with that. To me, most of your stuff is food based. Uh, and I like 3 and 4 are really pretty cool. I like the idea of these ones. So I would just say at this point, just solidify your idea, which one you're going with. Maybe kind of like in terms of your drawings, I think they're almost there. I think your photographing them is very clear, but maybe just kind of do a little bit more kind of clear lines around things. And then in the labels, rather than having them here, have them like right beside it, put an arrow, make it really obvious. Legends are really great in graphic design. A lot of times we have legends, but in this particular instance, I think it's just easier to see when you have them pointing to where they are. So if you can make that change, that'd be awesome. You know. Yeah, I definitely think you've got the hang of this. So again, my favorites. This one's a really interesting idea too. Um, so 2, 3, or 4. Why don't I? Why didn't I say number 1? So I didn't say number 1 because I have noticed that when you have like a big sort of like body head combination, which is like not a, it's a great idea. I've just found that in developing the character, when it kind of is all comes together, it gets kind of a little muddled and it doesn't seem to read as strongly as a character, you know. So that's the only reason I didn't choose this. I think it really just definitely follows the assignment parameters very clearly. It's just sort of a matter of knowing how things tend to work in this particular. Every time you work on a new type of design project, there are always these little sort of areas that you start noticing of things that can work. And so I always try to mention those things, especially in the first chat, so that students can have that in the back of their mind as they go forward. Okay, everybody, I think we're done with our critique. Nice job. Everybody's on the right track pretty much. But that doesn't matter how far off the track you are. At this point, you can revise. That's the whole point of this group critique, is that you submit a draft, you get feedback, you revise it, you submit it by the end of the day on Sunday, and you make the changes and take your work to the next level.